Hey, how's it going, everyone? Alex Swenson here, Director of Education. Thank you for hopping in here and working through today's topic, which is retreats. Chapter retreats, brotherhood retreats, new member retreats, officer transition retreats, a lot of different ways that you can go about planning and executing a retreat. But ultimately, what I want to do today is talk about some of the different purposes that retreats can serve, and also talk about how to plan one, how to get one together so that you're making the most efficient and effective use of the time that you have planned. I want to first say I'm not talking about necessarily a brotherhood getaway when I'm talking about retreats here. I know that there are times when people like to go away to a cabin or a hotel or a member's house and hang out for a couple days and consume alcohol at times and really just get to bond as a chapter. And obviously there's a time and a place for that, and that can serve its own value as long as it's being done safely and following our risk management guidelines. But I really want to focus more on the business side of things and putting together retreats that have very deliberate and specific goals that are going to help you advance the mission of Tau Kappa Epsilon and aid in the long-term success of your chapter or colony. So the first thing is, what takes place at a retreat? Why should we do a retreat? What can we use retreats for? And really the answer is all over the board. I covered a few of them already. You can do brotherhood retreats, and those can be, done at an offsite location where you're doing some team building activities. You're going through the process of really getting the chapter all on the same page, getting to know each other, inviting the full chapter. I think a full chapter retreat once a year is always a good idea, just to make sure that everyone is still, again, on the same page and bought into the goals of your chapter colony. Really, retreats are an opportunity to focus on some long-term planning, some things that you can dig into, some topics that you can really spend time on and chew on that you're not going to be able to spend time on in a half-hour-long officer meeting or in an hour-long chapter meeting. When you get into a different environment and you get into a different situation where you know that you're focusing on some of these long-term planning items, your mentality changes, your mindset shifts, and you're not going to get the same level of productivity. You're going to get a higher level than you would just sitting in the chapter room trying to put some plans and goals together. So that's another piece, is really getting some good planning done for the chapter, whether that's for recruitment or finances or new member education. There's a lot of opportunity to plan out things at a retreat that you don't have otherwise. Establishing buy-in is huge, and that might be with the new members, that might be with the full chapters, that might be with the officers. But again, when you get everyone in a room, you get them together, exchanging ideas, brainstorming, talking through challenges and opportunities in the future. Everyone who's a part of that process feels bought in on the plan. So if you're having an issue where, maybe 2 or 3 officers are thought of in a higher level or a higher tier than the rest of the officers, or maybe the chapter doesn't feel bought in with what the officers and the chairman are doing, holding a retreat's a really good opportunity, again, to get everyone focused in and back on the same page. And then the last big thing I think that retreats can be useful for are officer transitions. I would really strongly encourage you all to put together an officer transition retreat every single year. Whenever your elections take place, plan some time after that to spend a day or two focused on making sure that the transition is taking place properly from one officer to another. So often those are just a handoff of a binder or an exchange of a password on Google Docs or QuickBooks, for the CRISOs. A retreat setting is a really good place to be able to make sure that handoff is done in a way that, again, promotes some sustained success for the chapter. And outside of that, I think 2 officer retreats per year is really what the target should be. One for transitions, and then another one either in the winter or the summer, depending on when you do elections, that is just focused on goal setting and planning, especially if you do officer transitions in the winter, in December or January. Getting the officers together once over the summer in July or August leading into the school year can be really effective to get some high-level planning done so that you're not starting from from the ground level when you all get back to school and fire operations back up for the fraternity and for TKE. So there's a quick outline of the different things that can happen at retreats. When it comes to planning one, there's some step-by-step things I'll walk through, and then there's some best practices that I'll share at the end, some suggestions that I would make if you're looking to plan a retreat in the future. The first step to planning a retreat is picking a date and picking a location. Seems very simple, very easy, but it is obviously a very important step so that everyone knows when it's going on, where it's going on, what you're doing. You know, if you're going to go off site, which I would suggest, and I'll talk about a little later, getting that location locked in, if you need to sign a contract, if you need to reserve a room on campus, if you need to, you know, if you're going to one of your brother's houses, you know, making sure that you have everything you need there and that his parents aren't going to disrupt you or his siblings aren't going to disrupt you. That's extremely important. Next step is communicating expectations of attendance. So once you have a date and location selected, you can go to the parties that need to be there and make sure they have it on their calendar. Do this well in advance. Give them a month notice, 2 months notice. Don't try and throw a retreat together for next weekend and expect everyone to be there. That's not realistic. So communicating expectations on attendance is very, very important to the success of the retreat, because if the right people aren't in the room, if the people that need to be there aren't there, if you're doing a new member retreat and only half the pledge class is there because you gave them 3 days notice, that's not going to be effective. That's not going to accomplish the goals that you wanted to accomplish. So make sure that plenty of advance notice is given. Make sure that you identify who needs to be there and give them plenty of time to put it on their calendar. And also on that note, I would highly recommend bringing in an experienced voice who is unbiased. That could be a chapter advisor, that could be a board of advisors member, it could be a faculty advisor, or maybe it's just an older senior member of the chapter who has been an officer before, someone who's been graduated for a couple years, who doesn't have a named position with the chapter, but can offer some perspective that you might not be able to bring to the table. And there's nothing wrong with that, but having that, I don't want to say adult voice because we're all adults, having that senior voice in the room, having that experienced voice in the room can really help provide some perspective that the members of the chapter aren't going to have on their own, and our staff can be utilized in that as well, even if that doesn't mean that we're boots on the ground necessarily. We can Skype in, we can Zoom in, but getting other voices in the room, because a lot of times if the only people involved in the retreat are just the same 10 guys, the same 10 officers, it can very quickly turn into an echo chamber, and we don't want that. You know, we want to use the retreats to get some fresh ideas on the table and get some plans out there that are going to advance the chapter and not just keep it at the same level. So think about who you can bring in that's older, that's more experienced, that has some of that perspective. Next step is determining your goals. What are you really looking to accomplish? Again, maybe that's officer transitions. Maybe that's building a recruitment plan or planning a rush week. Maybe it is, building a plan to dig the chapter out of debt. There are tons of different ways you can approach this, but at the end of the day, if you don't have goals for the retreat, if you don't have desired outcomes, you're gonna spin in circles and you're just gonna be sitting in a room brainstorming without any actionable steps for how it's going to be accomplished. I would consider short-term goals and long-term goals. Short-term goal might be, plan out our rush week for this year, and a long-term goal might be develop a 6-month or a year-long strategic recruitment plan. Those can take place within the same setting, but make sure that they are separated so that you know the steps that need to be taken to accomplish each one of those goals. Next piece, once you have your goals and your outcomes, is building an agenda. I don't think you can build an effective schedule or an effective agenda without those goals, because again, you don't know what you need to spend time on to get out of the retreat what you're looking to. So when you're building your agenda, it should directly reflect the goals that you have already communicated, the goals that you have already determined. You should be spending time on the things that are going to help you achieve those goals. I would really plot out in great detail how much time you're going to spend on each topic. So yeah, if you're doing a retreat for recruitment, maybe just deciding on the rush shirt design is on the agenda, or maybe figuring out if you're going to do wings or pizza for Monday Night Football is on the agenda. That's fine. But assign a time limit to it. That shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes. If you don't assign a time limit and allow it to take an hour or 2 hours of your time trying to figure out where to order pizza from for rush week, you are wasting time. You're wasting precious time. You're wasting resources that could be spent on some higher level work. So think about how you're going to assign time blocks to each agenda item as well. Don't just put it on paper. Think about how long you want to spend on each thing. Share that agenda with everyone, every single person who's going to be there, and even people who aren't. You shouldn't have anything to hide. So send it out to the whole chapter if you're doing an officer retreat, and just say, hey guys, officer retreat this weekend. Here's our agenda. Here's what we're focused on. Looking forward to sharing updates when we get back. Sharing that agenda and sharing that schedule out, again, it's going to get everyone bought in. It's going to have everyone with expectations of what's going to be accomplished, and it's going to allow you to move much more efficiently than if you just keep that schedule close to your chest and it's only an internal document with one or two people. Think about pre-work as well. What work needs to go in ahead of time to make maximum use of the time at the retreat? Maybe you ask every single officer to come up with 3 goals for their position for the next year. Maybe you ask every single new member to read the TEAT guide or read a certain section of the Black Book, read the Declaration of Principles. What can you get done ahead of time that's going to save you time on site? Because setting goals, that can take an hour or two. But if you let all the officers know 2 weeks in advance that they need to show up with their goals already in place, you can spend that hour or two debriefing those goals and talking about how you're going to accomplish them. Again, really focused on actionable items. Brainstorming's great. Think tanks are great. They're very useful, but they can also be a time drain. So any pre-work that can be done ahead of the retreat to make sure that the actual event is taking place efficiently, I would encourage you to think about, and I would encourage you to accomplish. This can also be personality assessments. If you're trying to figure out, new officers, how are we going to function together? Let's all take the Myers-Briggs, or let's all take another personality assessment ahead of time so that we can talk on site about what the results mean. You can save 20 or 30 minutes that it would take to do it there at the retreat. So just plot that out and be very, very intentional with what you're asking people to do ahead of time. Think about any materials, supplies that you're going to need. These could be notebooks, markers, flip charts, chalkboards, dry erase. Don't get into a situation where you show up at the retreat and say, oh, I thought we were going to have a whiteboard, or oh, it would be really nice if everyone had something to write with, and only half of you do. Again, think of that ahead of time, communicate that ahead of time. Same with food and beverage. Are you ordering pizza? Are you ordering subs? Get everyone's Jimmy John's order the week before the retreat so you don't have to spend 20 or 30 minutes trying to figure out what everyone wants to eat. Have soft drinks, have bottled water available so guys aren't constantly leaving to go get drinks or go get food. All of those things, once again, they just maximize efficiency and allow you to spend time on what is most important. And then once you're on site and you're actually doing the retreat, biggest thing here is having someone in charge. Having a point person. That could be the Preakness. That's a natural choice, right? But it doesn't have to be. Could be the Epi, could be the Hegemon, could be a chapter advisor, someone older, someone who's unbiased, right? Like we talked about earlier, but having that point person is going to allow the meeting to flow as intended. Stick to the agenda, stick to the time allotments that you have assigned. Don't let the meeting get sideways where, again, you're spending 2 hours on a rush shirt design. But to make sure that that happens, you need to have someone in charge. You need to have someone who's comfortable stepping in and saying, all right, guys, we've spent enough time on rush shirts. Let's move on. If you don't have that, if everyone is in charge, then no one is in charge. So make sure you assign that point person and make sure that that person is comfortable with the agenda and with telling people that they need to wrap it up and get moved on to the next topic. A few best practices then is what I'll end with. The first thing that I've talked about a few times, get out of your normal environment. Don't do a retreat in the chapter room. Don't do a retreat in the same room, in the same building on campus that you're always in. Get off campus if you can. Again, use someone's house. If someone has a cabin, if someone has an event space that their family manages that you can utilize for a day, do that. At the very least, use somewhere different on campus. Getting out of your environment, it changes your mindset. It makes people more attentive. It makes them more alert, and it makes them more productive. So don't just expect a retreat to go perfectly. If you're sitting in a chapter room and everyone's in the same chair they're always in, they're going to have the same thoughts they always have. So that is extremely important. Next, consider making it substance-free. Drugs, tobacco, alcohol, get those off the table, at least for the time that you want to all be together having these important conversations. I know a lot of people think that they get more creative at times when they're drinking or when they're using substances, but ultimately that will not lead to that actionable game plan that we have talked about, that we desire. Doing that in an altered state, that's not going to help you when you leave the retreat to go be productive, because a lot of that stuff's either going to be forgotten or it's going to be cast aside or brushed to the side. The substance-free aspect, I think, is really important. Also on that note, technology. Set expectations for technology ahead of time. If guys have access to their laptops and to their phones and they're just constantly on those, they're not going to be paying attention. They're not going to be focused on the business at hand. So if your expectation is that laptops are put away, cell phones are in pockets, or maybe even cell phones are all put on a table ahead of time, let people know that before they show up. Communicating that ahead of time so that they can let their friends, their family know that they're going to be off the grid for a few hours, that's going to lead to a much more desirable outcome than springing it on them when they show up. So set expectations on technology, and really I'd encourage you to ask people to stay off their phones and their laptops for the time that you're conducting your business. Last thing is enjoy yourselves. Have fun. This is supposed to be fun work, planning out the future of your chapter, planning out the future of the fraternity. So you can laugh, you can cut up, you can have a good time, you can make jokes, as long as you're able to rein it back in and refocus when necessary. This shouldn't be a drag. This shouldn't be tedious work that you're doing at the retreat. You should be excited about everything that you're planning and looking to accomplish in the future. So don't minimize the fun aspect, and don't feel like you have to cast that aside and make sure everyone's just super serious the entire time. If you need help with retreats, I'd encourage you to check out the TKE Officer Transition Guide. It's available at tke.org/guides. There is a detailed layout for what an officer transition retreat should look like in there. So if that's something you're interested in, check that out. But most of the principles that apply to planning that retreat can apply to anything. The agenda and the pre-work and what you're looking to get out of it. So I would steer you there and encourage you to check that out as an additional resource. Again, tke.org/guides, and it is in the Officer Transition Guide. So please look there. Reach out to our office if you have any questions, if you have any issues, if you want us to be a part of the planning process for a retreat. Happy to do so. But again, hopefully you have a good plan in place and you're working towards some goals and some outcomes that are set ahead of time. That's all for me. Appreciate your time, appreciate your energy, appreciate your effort. Looking forward to talking again soon. Goodbye.